Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 51. And we're continuing on with Kartika Go's Multidimensional Traveler book. This, I think, is the third in the series. I think we'll maybe have two more. Such as its content, full of interest and instruction, methinks. Going to other planets. And keep in mind, other planets have non-physical realms, just like the Earth does. More than one. Planet Mars. On the night of a full moon, my dear friend and co-author Katie and I were sitting in a jacuzzi chatting about astronomy. Katie is quite the astronomy enthusiast, so rather than obsessing over boys in our spare time, we spend most of our time together discussing the planets, stars, and galaxies as we stargaze late into the night. As Katie was immersed deeply in the topic of the possibility of extraterrestrial life, I certainly blurted out in a serious tone, "Of course there is! There exist many different energetic realities, and each is categorized by its own distinct vibrational frequency. I travel between these dimensions, you know." At which point Katie's jaw instantly dropped. I noticed her begin to slowly ease away from me toward the opposite end of the jacuzzi and heard her mumble something about having to get up early the next day. I let out a sigh, skillfully faked a laugh, and exclaimed reassuringly, "Oh, I was just joking." She immediately seemed relieved by my white lie and was soon back to her usual self, responding to my false confession in her reliable, sarcastic manner. "If you travel between the dimensions, it means you've been to Mars and Jupiter, Miss Jean Grey, and you've probably kissed Wolverine too." What Katie didn't realize then was that I was telling the truth. I have indeed been to Mars. I travelled there on the night of my 19th birthday, determined to make my birthday night an especially memorable one. You could say I succeeded, but it sure didn't come easily. I had previously attempted to travel to the planet Mars on several occasions, but each to no avail. Each time I was abruptly and rather discouragingly sent right back to my physical body. It was only later on that I learned the universe functions in mysterious ways. And when a journey is not fated and hence blocked, it only means it is not the right time. Nevertheless, the night of my 19th birthday turned out to be just what I had deeply longed for, and after performing the usual protocols, I was able to successfully travel to the planet Mars. To my great surprise, the planet's energetic existence closely resembled the photographs we often see of it. I found myself in the center of a vast empty space, surrounded entirely by a peculiar maroon-colored surface that appeared to be made out of packed grains of sand. The atmosphere was rather murky and dim, and all I could see was a calm, dark ocean, which actually looked more like an unusually large lake. With my curiosity taking a toll on me, I began to wander aimlessly around the empty space until I noticed a palm-sized cube-shaped device maneuvering itself over the planet's sandy surface in a peculiar manner. Its movement appeared rather awkward and unpredictable in nature, leading me to cautiously suspect that it was most likely a tracking device. As I contemplated whether or not I should approach the device, I felt a forceful blow right across my back. But before I could turn my head to find out where it had come from, I was tightly blindfolded and brought onto what seemed like the back of an animal. Once the blindfold was taken off, I saw a dark red female being standing right in front of me. She peered at me through her peculiarly large eyes as though expecting an explanation for my presence. But I remained mute in front of the sight of her towering height and her arms that extended down past her knees. Her clothes resembled those of an Aboriginal warrior and were made from a dark red metal that almost perfectly matched the color of her skin. I realized almost immediately that we were inside some kind of hut and that everything surrounding us was dark red in color too, including a stack of chairs, their seats the shapes of hexagons, that was placed next to a large door. Eager to break the awkward silence, I introduced myself telepathically to the being. My name is Kartika. I come from planet Earth. I mean no harm. I'm a traveler. She did not reply and instead began to frantically walk in circles before finally deciding to approach me and embracing me tightly. It has always been rather difficult for me to put into words exactly how I felt in that particular moment. Her embrace seemed to have awakened a pleasant surge of vibrant energy within my energetic being, and I felt a deeply overwhelming sensation of love and purity flow freely through me. As I remained immersed in this beautiful feeling, she quickly moved toward the door and brought back two hexagonally shaped chairs, instructing me to sit down. I could not help but wonder why she had decided to hug me, as I had never experienced anything like that in any of my previous travels. When I asked her about this, she replied in a slightly nasal tone, "Here in Mars, my kind decide whether one is to be trusted or not through forming an energetic connection with them. Every being possesses its own unique energy coding, and it is this energy coding that emits the sound that your kind probably refer to as music. This music is unheard of by most beings, but to my kind it is heard through the gesture of energetic alignment, or what you call a hug. Now I know that you are to be trusted. My name is Danao. Why are you here? If I had not come and taken you with me, you would have been attacked. Do you have no knowledge of the Queros? They detect any energetic change in our planet. If any unusual energetic fluctuations are detected, they will automatically emit an electromagnetic force that could only be detrimental to you." She suddenly jumped up from her seat and pulled on a small lever that was dangling in the middle of the room, and the dim lighting in the hut was instantly switched off, leaving us in complete darkness. "It's safer this way," she explained, quickly picking up on my inquisitiveness. "This way they won't suspect you're here. The Queros send out patrols for you because they probably detected an energetic fluctuation. Darkness has overtaken our planet. There are two factions existing on Mars now. One is the ruling faction, who are puppets of darkness, while those of a more spiritual nature, my kind, remain in constant hiding. We are outnumbered by far." "Then our meeting is most certainly fated, Danao. I came here because I've always been inquisitive about your planet. As you know, your planet exists in the physical reality too, but most importantly, I have been traveling to different realms to alert them of the force of darkness that has overtaken planet Earth. These humans are living in a state of utter illusion. They do not know of the realities and, most importantly, they are not aware of what's happening energetically to their very own kind. They are satisfied living in this physical bliss without seeking the truth. They are in a trance, Danao." Well, that's a strong point. I don't know if the concept of a trance and I think has to be extended beyond the physical plane. When you observe carefully and objectively others on the physical plane, they do seem, many of them, to be in a trance of their own activities without looking out at the greater world around them. But it is quite similar on the spirit planes too, although people tend to have a wider frame of reference. But on the astral plane, people are very focused on fulfilling ambition and desire, whether it be for a better looking lover, or a course in engineering, or studying ancient languages, or. They want to better themselves, and that is generally an emotionally motivated ambition and desire. And as such, people are in a trance of their emotional bodies. And the same as you move on up into the mental body. People are in a sort of a trance about thinking, analyzing, learning how to think in a greater and more productive way than they ever did on Earth. And that, too, when you transcend that, that's also a trance. The only thing that doesn't seem to be a trance or an illusion to me, ultimately, even though all those illusions are useful, is to be at the Godhead level, the omniscient, omnipresent being of light, the drop of the ocean in the ocean. to which we return when we're finished with all our foolishness here. Anyway, it's a philosophical point. Maybe you don't feel like arguing about it. She reached across and took my right hand, placing it gently on her forehead as she kindly said, I sympathize with you. I read all of your thoughts and chatters. I sympathize with you. May a candle be lit on your planet Earth. She then proceeded to lift her right hand and place it on my forehead as she continued explaining. Kartika, our planet, along with all the planets you know of, such as Jupiter and Venus, originally existed in a higher dimension than planet Earth, but we were manipulated by the darker forces to exist in the same dimension as planet Earth and the physical planet Earth for their own uses. So you currently exist in the same dimension as the energetic Earth, and your planet's physical existence occupies the same dimension as planet Earth? I asked, perplexed at the realization her words had brought me to. Our planet, along with the physical planets that humans know of, exists in the physical, in the same dimension as planet Earth. But a small number of planets, along with ours, also exist in other dimensions as well. This is the reason you are able to interdimensionally travel here. She paused for a few moments, long moments, as if turning a thought over in her mind, and then continued. You must go now. It is not safe. May a candle be lit, she said in a worried tone. With her alarming words, I felt a wave of tingling energy quickly migrate through my forehead, automatically forcing my eyelids to close. When I managed to finally force my eyes open again, I found myself back in my physical body. The moon. I must admit that my visit to the moon is one that still perplexes me to this day. My friend Mary, who had received a rather loud wake-up call from reality when we were on vacation in Bali, had recently grown obsessed with the moon. She had just returned from her trip to Hong Kong and arrived with a suitcase full of moon dust souvenirs in tow. These souvenirs are pieces of interesting-looking gravel that have been placed in small glass containers, which, according to Mary and the vendors who fervently sell them, are dust fragments from the moon that will bring fortune to their owners. I guess that means good fortune. As Mary handed both Jane and me a moon souvenir with an undeniably proud smile on her face, I noticed that she was basically covered in everything moon. She wore a dark t-shirt with a bright image of the full moon, a silver necklace with a dangling half-moon pendant, and even a ring that looked like a full moon. You look so vibrant after your trip, Mary. She giggled with the same beaming smile and replied excitedly, Yes, you have no idea. I uncovered amazing revelations about myself when I was in Hong Kong. I was shopping in the old market when an old man asked me if I wanted a reading, and I thought, why not? So he gave me one, and he told me that I had a past life on the moon and that my soulmate currently resides there. He told me that the moon itself is actually my lucky charm, and so I have the most luck whenever there is a full moon. Remember how I got an A in that political science final exam I didn't study for? No wonder. I remember looking up at the sky that same night and there was a freaking full moon. I tried to form an appropriate reply, and Mary quickly replied, I forgot to say, the old man also told me that I was a llama of the high mountain in my past life, too. You were a llama? Jane interrupted, her forehead crinkled in bewilderment, as in the animal. Mary, who seemed to be deeply offended by James' innocent remark, replied snappishly, No, a llama, as in a monk of the higher order, obviously. I remained silent, trying hard to contain my laughter while Mary resumed her passionate speech about her past life on the moon. All I could think of at that moment was how shocked Mary would be if I told her the truth about the moon. As much as we desire everything to be perfect, imperfections will always exist. This is a fundamental concept that applies to everything, including multidimensional travel. When I first started to entertain the thought of traveling to the moon, my stubborn curiosity, which I've already mentioned a few times, got the better of my intuition and misgivings, which told me that I shouldn't go. From the very beginning of my journey, I was faced with obstacles that I could not comprehend. Even though I'd carefully directed my thoughts to travel to the moon, my energetic body remained there in my own room. After some effort through sheer willpower, I managed to guide my energetic body to automatically align itself with the same vibrational rate as the moon. I was horrified and left speechless by what I saw when I arrived. An alarming number of what looked like spaceships were orbiting the moon, their irregular and rapid movements shattering the field of my vision. On the surface itself, I could make out a group being that appeared to be desperately trapped in some kind of invisible force field. They were all speaking among themselves and engaging in a variety of odd tasks. I spotted one being which strongly resembled the energetic body of a man, actually roaming back and forth while gesturing with his hands, as though he was speaking to someone or something that could not be seen. His gestures grew even more peculiar as he began to make swooping movements with his hands, as though he were digging. Even though I stood right in front of him, he could not see me. It was as if there was an incredibly thick and tall wall between us. Waving my hands over my head, I desperately tried to catch his attention until I suddenly received a telepathic message. "Over here," a soft female voice echoed in my mind, attempting to divert my attention. A few feet opposite from where I stood, I noticed a woman sitting cross-legged on the ground. She was dressed in what appeared to be a military-type uniform in tones of green and brown that blended in with each other, and her dark blonde hair was bundled in a messy bun on top of her head. Still extremely curious about the invisible barrier, I extended my arm outward to try and touch it when I heard her now familiar voice telepathically ring through my mind. "You do not want to touch it." I immediately jerked my hand back and jumped backwards. "Everyone here, aside from me, is trapped in their own time and their own illusion," she began to explain. "None of them is entirely conscious of their true whereabouts. I just managed to break free of what I've come to call the robotic dream sequence. I don't know how long it will last before they find out that I've broken through their wavelength emission." I peered at her uniform, and the woman continued telepathically, intersecting the course of my thoughts. "Yes, my physical body may be dead now, but it may still be alive. I don't know. Many people that experiment with matters in time and space tend to find themselves on the moon. Even I can't explain it. See that gentleman with the black hair? We ended up here together." She pointed at the man, but I paid no attention. I thought I understood all the fundamentals of multidimensional travel, yet I could not wrap my head around what she had just explained to me. "What is the moon? Who resides up here?" I finally decided to ask her in my confusion. Suddenly I saw her desperately grasping her chest in obvious pain. She let out a loud cry of despair as her body was lifted off the ground by some unknown force and flung toward the invisible barrier. She fell to the ground with a heavy, agonizing thump and seemed to remain unconscious for a few seconds before waking up and beginning to move around in a strange manner. Like the oddly mannered man who'd caught my attention earlier, she seemed to be talking to herself as she went through the pantomime motions of preparing a meal. Shocked and confused, I desperately tried to get her attention, but soon realized it was no use. She was now stuck in the same trance state as everyone else. I thought about calling on the higher beings for assistance, but before I could even manage to try, I felt myself being vacuumed upward by a strong unseen force. As I was pulled higher and higher off the surface of the moon, I began to feel excruciating pain, like that from a hefty electric shock, course through my body. I felt as though I had been sliced open by a knife and zapped with electricity all at the same time. In panic and terror, I called for assistance from higher beings several times, but my cries went unheard, and the unbearable pain I felt within my being escalated exponentially. I was left with no choice but to do what any desperate multidimensional traveler from Earth would do. I began to focus my mind on contacting my physical brain so that it would alert me to wake up. "Wake up! Wake up! Open your eyes!" I shouted telepathically to myself. I felt my eyelids begin to lift themselves in infinitesimal fractions as my right arm gravitated to my right eyelid to force it open, but I could not. My consciousness had only managed to transfer itself to my physical brain for a few seconds before returning to the same energetic situation. "You have to wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!" I anxiously screamed to myself. And as soon as my consciousness finally transferred back to my physical body, I threw myself to the ground from the edge of my bed, thinking that the shock of the fall would force my energetic body to return to its physical existence. I forcefully pinched myself and even slapped my face several times, until, getting desperate, I finally grabbed a bottle of water and poured its contents over my face to wake myself up completely. I found myself drenched in not only water, but an alarming sensation of fear, so I stumbled for my phone and quickly dialed my mother. I wonder. We know from many testimonies of astronauts and out-of-body travelers and whistleblowers that there are spaceships not only whipping around the moon but using it as a base. And there is a moon base seemingly built and staffed by aliens and humans, and has been there for a long time, like more than 10 years, 50, 60 at least. And it's on the other side. They don't get you, they don't show you any photographs of it, that's for sure. But many out-of-body travelers, including myself, have seen it. You can't get in. There's a energy field. And I mean, who wants to get in anyway? Who cares what they're doing? I don't. Doesn't really matter to me what they're doing. I'll tell you what they are doing. They're creating their own karma, as is everyone else. So if you want a part of that karma, you go on and mess with them. I'd advise you not to. It's a waste of time. It's like mucking around with drug gangs, you know. It's not going to get you anywhere. Anyway, that could also be a lower astral trip too. It's possible because the beings she met there were definitely lower vibrating beings, no question at all. And speaking about lower vibrating beings, she has a chapter on deception and spirits that will deceive you. And that's something that, we should talk about a little more. The first form of deception includes lies that are disseminated by beings of a lower dimensional energetic realms. Remember that when you embark on a journey in a negative mindset with negative emotions, it is almost guaranteed you will end up traveling to the lower dimensional worlds. Unfortunately, I was not always aware of this. In my earlier travels, I was often overcome with great fear when I would find myself in terrifying situations. Sometimes lower dimensional beings transferred their electronic resonances to my tech gadgets and appliances. At night, I would receive numerous phone calls from family members on my contact list who would later claim that they'd never contacted me. I became so overwhelmed with terror that I soon began to sleep with all the lights on. I also had yet to come up with the appropriate protocols for traveling pleasantly and safely to other dimensions. As a consequence, all my early journeys were accidental and generally automated in nature. My body would be overcome by a heaviness of such intensity that I was unable to move, and though I were paralyzed, and I would hear beings approach me and telepathically communicate with me in distinct voices that I soon became all too familiar with. They would introduce themselves to me as spirit guides, some even claimed to be angels. One particular entity that I regularly communicated with in my earlier travels was able to deceive me by claiming that she'd previously lived as a human on Earth before dying and becoming an angel. She encouraged me to focus my meditations on her and instead of on the force of universal love and light, as I had been, and in return promised she should always be there for me in times of need, unlike the light beings who had visited me once and never returned. At the time, I was young, naive, and vulnerable. I blindly believed every word this being spoke. I would soon find myself terribly misled by her. With beguiling encouragement, I made the choice of focusing my meditation on her instead of the goodness in the universe. I continued conversing with her in the same paralyzed state every night for the next 3 weeks, and it was only at the end of those 3 weeks, empowered by feelings of love and light, that I was finally able to see her true appearance. That particular night, I concentrated my thoughts on visiting her, and although I was vibrating in a much higher frequency than before, I was strangely able to reach her lower dimensional level of existence, instead of the higher dimensional existences I normally would have been drawn to. It was then that I truly saw her for the first time. She was a gruesome being of absolute ugliness and evil, closely resembling the evil spirits typically depicted in horror movies. As she appeared in front of me, I received the firm intuition that she had indeed previously been a human being, who had later become a lower dimensional being as a result of the hatred and negative emotions she possessed. With all the cards finally laid out on the table, the extent of her deception was revealed to me that night. But because I was vibrating at a high frequency and my thoughts and emotions were focused solely on love and light, I simply said to her, "I pity you. I send you my love and light. As soon as the words left my mouth and she recognized the love within me, she began to run amok and scream in great agony, as though my words were torturing her, until eventually it dissipated into absolute nothingness. Well, watch out for negative emotions and thoughts. Certainly, going into a projective meditation when you've had a lousy day is probably not a good idea. Have a good day first and then move outwards. Now, another kind of deception. My first experience with this particular type of deception in the energetic world occurred while I was on a trip to India. For reasons unknown, there exist numerous energetic portals throughout this country. Well, I'd say that's a lot of the Hindu and, mainly Hindu, some Muslim, but mainly Hindu guru types that learn to do all these sort of things, some on the right-hand path and some on the left-hand path. And Hinduism as an elaborate belief system and religion has existed in India for many, many thousands of years, far beyond all those modern religions. That's why the portals are there. On my second night there, utterly exhausted due to the unavoidable jet lag, I was falling asleep and slowly detaching from my physical when I noticed a small red door with a peculiar doorknob made of jet crystal manifest on the ceiling above me. It slowly opened to reveal one of my good friends who was supposed to be in London at the time. She smiled cheerfully at me, her white teeth glimmering, as she waved at me to come through the door with her. At first I was reluctant to do so, but that thought disappeared as soon as I heard her recognizable voice resonate through my mind. "Come, isn't it exciting? Don't you want to go on a spiritual adventure together?" The familiar voice immediately put me at ease and I let my guard down. She's one of my greatest friends, after all, I thought to myself. I lifted myself using sheer force of willpower and slipped through the door alongside her, only to find myself in a ruby-red, round tunnel encompassed in what looked like intertwined weeds made of metal. I instantly felt that something was off. Yeah, I did too. For even in this early stage of my multidimensional experiences, I was well aware that different colours depicted different spiritual vibrational frequencies. I had learned that red in particular was considered to be a negative colour in the energetic sense. It tends to be the colour of passion and lust and maybe deception too. I stepped following my friend as she continued to move through the dimly lit tunnel and quickly turned back, nervously searching for the red door we had entered from. When, with relief, I spotted it, I felt an excruciating magnetic force pulling me from the back, and I knew instantly that it was the being that had appeared to me as my friend. The electromagnetic force shot me out toward the top of the tunnel, and I landed on the ground with an excruciating thump. I immediately began ordering my mind to wake myself up, as I knew this would be the fastest way to escape the attack I was experiencing. Fortunately, within a few seconds, of course that felt like hours, I found myself back in my physical body. A little note here. When travelling energetically, you're almost always guaranteed a safe return as long as your physical brain remains continuously replenished with oxygen. In other words, as long as you remain alive in the physical sense. In the light of this, whenever you find yourself in danger while travelling, the fastest way to return to your body is by alerting your brain. Obviously, beings of the lower dimensional realms can alter their energetic appearance for the purpose of deceiving you. They are also capable of strategically directing frequencies to your brain, enabling them to gain access to familiar voices stored within your long-term memory, which they can then use to deceive you even further. As do the aliens when they're mucking around with people. I think we get time for another one here. This is the third form of deception. As I continued travelling freely and aimlessly through the universe, I finally came across a planet that strongly reminded me of planet Earth. Its resemblance to Earth was striking. The only difference was that this particular planet was entirely composed of luscious greenery on one side and clusters of breathtaking oceans on the other. Having always felt a deep attraction to the ocean, I was automatically drawn toward the oceans and found myself flying at them at great speed. Excuse me. See, that's the karma of eating lunch just before doing your your video. Geez, it gets you no matter where you're going. I took a deep breath of the exhilarating fresh air and stared longingly into the expanse of shimmering blue water. My gaze soon came across a curious yet beautiful island covered entirely in iridescent white sand. On it were 5 majestic pyramids, blindingly golden color. I marveled at the precise placement of these pyramids, 4 skillfully positioned at the corners of a perfect square, with the large pyramid at the center. There was another similar island, almost entirely covered in the same twinkling white sands, but this one was oval-shaped. On this island I could see a golden pyramid with 2 majestic pillars that met at its highest point. Utterly awestruck by this wonder, my concentration quickly shifted when I caught sight of a man in the distance. With a shining golden staff in his left hand and a furious frown on his face, he galloped toward me on a white stallion. As he drew closer, the glare of his chunky golden armor forced me to blink a few times. The White Stallion. Remember Jurgen's use encountering a young woman, sort of doing a pretty good impersonation of a dragon? He reminded me of a warrior during medieval times, the kind that would have appeared in a battle alongside King Arthur. I could tell he was coming fast, the white sand shooting out into the air behind his horse as it careened across the island dunes. It instantly became clear to me that my presence had been misinterpreted as a threat, so I made my way to the other side of the planet. I was initially astounded by the green side of the planet, particularly by its marked resemblance to certain impoverished regions of India. I found myself in what seemed to be a deserted village where muddy houses, or more accurately, unsteady shacks, were arranged in a single crescent that was entirely surrounded by wide, luscious forests. Each shack was composed of 2 levels, with a makeshift balcony protruding from the higher level. As I made my way through this curious town, I noticed a woman dressed in mustard yellow Indian sari, sitting cross-legged on a balcony of one of the houses. There was an enormous moon-shaped stone bowl in her lap, and as she muttered various mantras underneath her breath and placed her hands over the bowl, a fire ignited inside of it. Although she was seated, I could tell that she was a few inches shorter than the average human, and I wondered at her disproportionately large head. I continued walking, my gaze bouncing from one dirty house to another until I reached the last house. With its wide doors open, it seemed to be welcoming me inside. Led by my intense inquisitiveness, I entered the house and immediately stumbled upon a diminutive man. He had deeply tanned skin, short brown hair, and looked as though he was of Indian or Pakistani descent. With a bewildered look on his face, he stared at me in silence for a while before asking telepathically whether I needed assistance. I asked him whether this planet was Earth. "No, this is certainly not Earth, most certainly not," he responded with an air of arrogance, implying by his tone that Earth was a place for backward or less evolved being. When I asked him where I was, he replied, "This is Jatacawarta." Not Jakarta, Jatacawarta. Though we exist in our physical too, we are far more advanced than residents of Earth. How else can we communicate and see you even when we're in our physical bodies? Earth? How could you think of this as Earth? I repeated the word Jatacawarta a few times in my mind, ingraining it into my memory, so that I would remember upon returning to my physical body. I asked him if he would tell me more. "This is a place during Ashoka time, Ashoka period we call it. You must know Ashoka," he stated with a demanding look of certainty on his face. Then he continued, squinting, "Earth, do you know that we can come and go to Earth at any time? We came through the caves of the Himalayas. We also often use the Nepali border region. No one notices us when we walk among humans. Humans, they fear the unknown. They fear the ones who are different. So they choose not to notice differences when the difference is small." I telepathically agreed with him and nodded my head, thinking to myself how unusually large his head was. He quickly caught on to my thoughts and proceeded to laugh, before asking me with a puzzled look where I was from. or whether indeed I was from Earth, for he could not comprehend how I was able to visit this planet if this was the case. According to him, energetic travelers no longer came from Earth due to the various restrictions and barriers that have been put in place to prevent them from traveling interdimensionally. I glanced at him with a frown after hearing his explanation and asked, "What is the current year, if you may tell me?" His face was suddenly overcome with an injured expression, as though the concept of time itself was somehow an impertinence. "I've told you this is Ashoka time. You said you understood. I would have thought of you as more advanced than those backward humans. It is Ashoka time." Hoping not to upset the man with my presence or questions any longer, I asked him to tell me of any other nearby planets or continents with the same frequency that I could travel to. He mentioned a nearby planet whose rotational frequency, his words, greatly differed from that of Jatakawarta. After thanking him for his hospitality, I was soon on my way. I crouched down to exit through the small back door of the house and began to focus on the usual protocols for directing myself to my next destination. I was soon distracted when I heard a cacophony of screaming voices growing louder. "Catch her! Catch her! Catch her!" The crazed words hit me like waves of a violent storm, and the primal fear instantly kicked in. I began to lift myself upward using the power of my mind, but as I ascended, I felt as though I was being suffocated. It was not until I glanced down in frantic confusion that I noticed someone's arm wrapped firmly around my rib cage. I felt the arm's grasp suddenly tighten, and soon a scorching sensation of pain shot through my body. It was as though the life force was being pulled out of me. Twitching the agonizing sensation, I quickly looked over my shoulder in search of the source of pain, only to find the same woman I had seen earlier on the balcony of the house, staring sickeningly at me. I telepathically ordered her to let me go, to which she viciously declared that I was hers to keep. As I squirmed violently to free myself from her tenacious grasp, I received a message through an accidental telepathic linkage between her minds, informing that she wanted to keep me caged like a wild exotic pet, as she believed there were many benefits to owning an interdimensional traveler. Because different frequencies hold different means of knowledge, achieving complete control over an interdimensional traveler, such as me, would enable her to gain knowledge and power for her own selfish purposes. As I considered this horrifying thought, I felt the life force being constricted out of me. Although I was in my energetic form, I had thankfully managed to maintain a link with my physical brain. Helpless under this woman's immensely powerful grasp, I began to directly transmit energetic thought waves from my energetic body to my physical mind. These thought waves carried the message that I was in danger and begged my brain to physically wake up so that my energetic body could be pulled back. I abruptly and with great relief woke up in my room feeling extremely exhausted and drained. Following this incident, I came across various works of Sanskrit literature, particularly the great epic stories that are collectively known as the legends of Ashoka. I discovered that Ashoka was a mythical king who had apparently enforced Buddhism as a religion. A number of these Sanskrit illustrations as well as writings were collectively known as the Jakata tales, referring to Buddhist tales that largely spoke of the various bodhisattvas or mythical enlightened beings as portrayed by the Buddhists. After studying the ancient writings in detail, I further uncovered that Warta signified city. Thus my travel had in fact led me to Jakarta city, or the Story City. It became clear to me that beings of Jatakawarta had once possessed strong etheric connections with Earth's past civilizations, and it is highly probable that they openly visited and communicated with these previous civilizations. Considering the current problems in our universe, we'll unfortunately never know whether or not their realm was overcome with darkness, and as a result coerced into treating visitors in such negative ways. Oh, I don't know about that. I think we can find out. Let you be warned, you newbie travelers. Most of you won't go to these places, I'm quite sure. As you move out of your body into your bedroom and into the house and into out of the window and into the neighborhood, moving around, and finally getting the idea after entertaining yourself with lakes and mountains and waterfalls and tall buildings and whatnot, you'll figure your way out to the astral plane where you can meet your dearly beloveds and reunite with them in love. Until the next time, friends, I think there'll be one more of these. I wish you well, and much love.